A silence older than language lies upon the high mountains of Asia. Dawn spills like molten copper over the ridges of the Altai, and the world, cold, vast, uninhabited, holds its breath. The wind moves through the conifers in a voice that no human being has yet named. It drags mist through valleys, sighs across frozen rivers, and whispers against the limestone mouth of a cave. Inside, the darkness is alive. It smells of stone and marrow of ash, long turned to dust. 1,000 generations of wolves have slept here. Before them bears. Before them a species now gone, yet not gone enough. For buried in this cold earth between layers of clay and time lies the fragment of a finger. Smooth, small, not quite human, not quite anything else. Imagine the world 300,000 years ago. The planet is colder, quieter. Ice sheets crawl across the north like slow thoughts. Forests migrate with the climate, rivers shift their paths as if dreaming. In Africa, early Homo sapiens are learning to trap heat in stone and thought. But here, thousands of miles east, another lineage breathes beneath the mountain mist. They are not strangers to the fire. They walk upright, carry the marks of strength and endurance carved by the mountain wind. Their skulls are heavy-browed, their hands thick with the power to shape stone. They are Denisovans, cousins to Neanderthals, kin to us yet separate. A species molded by altitude and silence. We did not know their name until barely a decade ago. But the Earth remembered. In the summer of 2008, a team of Russian archaeologists entered this same cave, Denisova, with the patience of ghosts. Their lights sliced through the dark, reflecting off tiny bones lodged in silt. At first they believed it belonged to a Neanderthal child. Only later, under fluorescent hum in a faraway lab, did the genome whisper a different story. Inside that tiny finger bone slept a secret older than history, a new branch of humanity. A people who had walked the earth for hundreds of millennia and vanished without leaving faces, tools, or names, only molecules of memory hidden in the code of our blood. Long before that discovery, long before we could imagine sequencing DNA, two human worlds were colliding. In the mountains of Siberia, on the edges of Asia's Great Plains, Homo sapiens were migrating eastward from Africa. They carried with them a growing mastery of thought symbol fire art. And they were not alone. The Denisovans had ruled this frontier for thousands of winters. Their lungs were shaped by thin air, their bodies by cold. They had learned to survive where others could not, carving dwellings into rock-trapping ibex and deer, whispering songs perhaps lost to the wind. When the two kinds of human met, it was not as myth once told us, not a single battle, but an overlapping of shadows. Encounters in mist. A glance across a river valley. A hunt, shared or stolen. Sometimes perhaps love. Sometimes blood. And so began a quiet war that would never be recorded, only remembered by the genome. In our cells, ancient whispers remain. Geneticists today find traces of Denisovan DNA in the peoples of Southeast Asia, Melanesia, and Tibet. It lingers like an echo of old alliances. In the Tibetans, a single Denisovan gene helps their blood grasp oxygen at thin altitudes, an ancient gift from mountain kin. In others, it shaped immunity, resistance, endurance. The war between species was not just violence, it was exchange, a fusion of bodies that would sculpt the human future. But in this first meeting under the ancient sky, they could not know what they were becoming. Picture a night somewhere along the Himalayan foothills 60,000 years ago. The temperature falls below freezing, the trees glitter with frost. In a small clearing, a group of Homo sapiens huddle near a fire, dark-eyed, fragile thinking beings still new to this land. From beyond the tree line, a shape watches, broad shoulders, amber eyes reflecting flame. A Denisovan hunter. He breathes the scent of smoke he does not own. He hears laughter, the strange music of another kind of mind. In that moment, the world divides. Two ways of being human face each other, each sensing something both alien and familiar. No words cross between them. Only the pulse of heat, the brightness of flame, the mirrored recognition, you are like me. Tens of millennia later, when scientists brush the dust from their discoveries, it is not only bones they uncover, it is tension. Every artifact from Denisova cave, every tooth and tool, is a fragment of a forgotten dialogue. A molar the size of a walnut, a shard of ochre perhaps used to paint skin or stone, a bracelet polished from green chlorite, gleaming even after 70,000 years, a whisper of elegance in a harsh world. Who made it? The answer shimmers between possibilities. Homo sapiens, Neanderthal, Denisovan, or did all three touch it in sequence, each unaware of the other's stories, each adding fingerprints to eternity? In a sterile lab thousands of miles from that mountain, a scientist peers through glass at a single hair. Inside she sees not death, but legacy. A double helix unfolding like the scroll of time. Here lies the proof that our species has never been alone. That our ancestry is not a straight line, but a woven fabric of encounters, some violent, some tender, all irreversible. Science at its best is a form of resurrection. Every bone unearthed is a question, and every answer is an act of grief for what we will never fully know. And so the story begins not with conquest, but with a breath, the moment before flame. Before Homo sapiens and Denisovans would intermix, before they would vanish into shared DNA, there was this stillness, a mountain dawn, a finger bone waiting in the dark. The earth poised between silence and speech, for in that breath lies the entire human story, the longing to see ourselves in the eyes of another, the fear that what we find will not be so different, and the knowledge that every discovery, every encounter, is the spark of both creation and extinction. The wind curls once more through the pines. Light touches the cave's edge, brushing against the shadows that have slept there since before memory. Somewhere far below, a river breaks the ice, whispering the oldest truth of all, that time is never lost. It only waits to be remembered. The world has turned a little warmer. The ice ages breathe in cycles retreating and returning, like the slow heartbeat of the earth. Between those glacial pulses, valleys open, rivers unfurl, and forests creep back into regions once drowned in frost. It is within one such fragile interlude, perhaps 60,000 years before our time, that two humanities begin to share the same horizon. The first fire glows in the dark like a second sun. Its smoke coils into the night air, carrying the smell of fat ash and life preserved through heat. Around it, the first Homo sapiens families of Asia gather, descendants of wanderers who crossed deserts and coastlines from Africa, driven by hunger, curiosity, and the quiet tyranny of the human mind. They speak softly, their words born from the new technology of sound language, no longer just cries of warning or mating calls, but structures of thought. Each syllable holds an image, a memory, a story. Firelight dances on their faces, illuminating the greatest evolutionary leap, yet unseen imagination. They no longer see the world as it is, but as it could be. Far to the north, in the high passes of the Altai and the Himalayas, another fire burns. Its builders are shorter, broader, and stronger. Their breath fogs the air, even in summer, their blood thickened by centuries of thin oxygen. They too have mastered flame, but not story. Not yet. The Denisovans use fire as a tool, not a myth. They have learned to carry embers between camps in hollow bones. They roast roots, melt ice for water, harden spears in the glow. But to them, fire is not divine, it is muscle, not meaning. And still that same glow, the same ancient orange heartbeat unites the night of both species. For a moment in geological time, the Earth becomes a single, vast campfire. In the fossil record, this crossing is invisible. There are no battlefields, no cities, no monuments, only traces in genes and tools, stone flakes scattered like the punctuation of a forgotten conversation. But if we close our eyes and listen carefully, we might hear what it sounded like. Picture the Altai steppe at dusk. The air hums with the faint rhythm of insects. Herds of horses graze across the slopes. A trail of smoke rises near the horizon. A Denisovan hunter follows it, spear in hand. He moves with the precision of one raised by cold, each breath measured each step, deliberate. He reaches a ridge and sees something strange figures, unlike his kin. Taller, leaner, their faces narrower, their fire surrounded by bones, not just burned, but carved. On a flat rock, one of them has etched lines that meet at perfect right angles, geometry without reason. Art before agriculture. The Denisovan watches. He feels, perhaps for the first time, that he is no longer the only kind of human the world allows. The meetings between the two were likely rare days of walking apart seasons between sightings. Yet each encounter carried the weight of destiny. Some may have fought territorial and primal, some may have traded tools or gestures of curiosity, and some, inevitably, may have touched not in violence, but in wonder. Genetic evidence tells us what history cannot. Between 50,000 and 60,000 years ago, Homo sapiens and Denisovans interbred not once, but many times. The children of those unions carried two worlds in their veins, and through them the war between species became something more complex than conquest. It became inheritance. But make no mistake, this was also an age of extinction. Every alliance in evolution carries a cost. As Homo sapiens spread eastward, the Denisovans began to fade. Their habitats shrank, their numbers dwindled. In time, the fires of one species outnumbered the fires of the other. The jungles of Southeast Asia, once theirs, became strange and crowded with newcomers who shaped tools from bone, drew symbols in sand, and sang into the darkness. We do not know if the Denisovans understood what was happening, whether they could sense, like animals, before a storm that their kind was becoming story. But in the soil of caves, in the shards of teeth and stone, the pattern of their retreat is written. Their extinction was not a single event. It was a slow erasure, generation by generation, glacier by glacier, until only their echoes remained inside us. Thousands of centuries later, archaeologists will kneel beside blackened hearths in the mountains of Siberia and Tibet. They will sift through layers of ash, each one a page in the diary of a species. Here they will find flakes of flint sharpened by hands that vanished. There, a charred bone cracked open for marrow. And deep beneath it all, they will find the unmistakable residue of fire built by beings who were almost, but not quite, human. From these traces, we will reconstruct entire worlds. We will learn that Denisovans carried obsidian across impossible distances, that they tamed caves into shelters, that they lived not as beasts but as minds caught in an earlier stage of awakening. Science, in its quiet reverence, will give them back their dignity. What truly separates the two species is not muscle or bone, it is abstraction. The human brain, somewhere in the stretch between 200,000 and 100,000 years ago, discovered the invisible. When Homo sapiens looked at a flame, they saw more than heat. They saw symbol, they saw continuity, they saw a ghost dancing within the light, a thing that could be tended, fed, or lost. That ghost became myth. Myth became language. Language became civilization. The Denisovans, like the Neanderthals, may have stood at the threshold of this revelation, but the doorway opened only once, and we were the ones who walked through. Yet we carry their fingerprints in our blood, which means, in a way, they walked through with us. High in the Himalayas, near the frozen roof of the world, lives a people who breathe where others choke. Their blood binds oxygen with inhuman efficiency. Their hearts beat slower, steadier. When geneticists traced this adaptation, they found something astonishing. It was Denisovan. A single inherited gene, EPS1, gifted across tens of millennia, allows the modern Tibetan to thrive where air thins to a whisper. A fragment of extinct DNA survives in every breath, taken above 3,000 meters. The ghost of a mountain hunter lives on in the lungs of those who prey on Everest's slopes. By 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had carried fire across Asia, into Indonesia, across the Wallace Line, and toward Australia. Everywhere they went, the remains of other humans followed: Neanderthals in the west, Denisovans in the east, each flickering out like candles before a storm, but in every extinction something remained. The Denisovans left not monuments but mutations. They became the invisible architects of resilience, heat, tolerance, immunity, altitude. In our species' genetic library, their pages are still read every day. Thus, even as one kind of human disappeared, the other expanded, carrying fragments of the lost within its cells. Extinction and inheritance became two sides of the same evolutionary flame. When scientists sequence ancient DNA today, they are not just decoding biology, they are reading poetry. Every gene is a stanza of survival, every mutation a line of history written by hunger, cold, and chance. We now know that the story of Homo sapiens is not that of a chosen species, but of a mosaic. We are not the sole survivors, we are the sum of everyone who came before. Neanderthal, Denisovan, and countless unnamed ancestors all whisper within our marrow. To be human, then, is not to be singular. It is to be haunted and blessed by multiplicity. Return now to the cave. The scientists' lamps flicker against the wall, casting modern shadows over ancient ones. The air smells of damp limestone and centuries of silence. A hand brushes soil from a burnt layer. Beneath it, charcoal. Beneath that, a layer of bones. And beneath the bones, another fire older still. Each generation buried its own flame, unaware that one day another kind of being would uncover it, searching for itself. Perhaps that is the truest continuity of all, not the shape of the skull or the number of genes shared, but the endless chain of curiosity. The need to remember, the need to look back into the dark and find meaning. We were once strangers sharing a world of smoke and shadow. Now in the sterile glow of laboratories we meet again. What did the Denisovans see when they looked at us? Did they sense destiny or doom? Did they recognize the spark of something too powerful to coexist with? Maybe they didn't think in such words. Maybe all they knew was instinct, that the new humans carried something the world had never seen, the ability to imagine the future. And maybe in some secret corner of their minds, they feared what that meant. The last known Denisovans likely perished in isolation, their population splintered by geography and climate. Some may have found refuge in the islands of Southeast Asia, where tropical forests muffled the cry of extinction. Others may have merged with the newcomers, their identity dissolving into the vast genetic sea of Homo sapiens. When the final campfire of a pure Denisovan tribe burned out, no one witnessed it. No one carved their epitaph in stone. But the earth recorded it in her quiet way, in pollen, in cave soot, in sediment. Every layer of earth is a heartbeat, and in the pulse of that layer, the Denisovans still burn. The story of fire did not end in the mountains. It spread through every epoch, every discovery. From the first embers to the engines of spaceflight, we have been repeating the same act, taming light, shaping warmth, fighting night. But perhaps the origin of that obsession lies not in Homo sapiens alone. Perhaps deep inside the inheritance of flame lies a shared spark from Denisovan hands, the instinct to hold light against the dark. We are not the first to stare into the abyss and dare to illuminate it. We are merely the last to remember. In the Altai Mountains, snow drifts quietly across the entrance of Denisova Cave. The wind has not forgotten the smell of smoke. Somewhere beneath the frozen soil, ashes sleep in silence. If you listen, the air still hums with the breath of fire, the memory of two humanities who once sat on opposite sides of the same flame. One would vanish, the other would inherit the world. But both in their own way taught the earth how to dream. The world turns green, not the soft green of gardens or the orderly lines of cultivated land, but the deep, ancient green of primeval chaos. A place where light itself becomes a living thing, fractured by mist, broken by ferns, diffused through layers of leaves that have never known the shadow of civilization. This is Southeast Asia, 60,000 years before the written word, a labyrinth of forest, river, and rain. Here, every sound has meaning: the scream of cicadas, the hollow boom of a hornbill's wings, the thunder of rain striking palm leaves thicker than armor. The air itself trembles with life. Between the trunks, shapes move. Some are familiar macaques leaping between branches, deer, treading softly through mud, monitor lizards, dragging tails like drawn swords. But others walk upright. Their eyes reflect the same light as ours. These are the children of the divided human tree, the Homo sapiens newly arrived from the west, and the shadowed kin who already call this jungle home, the southern Denisovans, adapted to heat, humidity, and the eternal drone of insects. For the first time, the two humanities share not just a sky, but an ecosystem. Rainforests are terrible archives. They consume what they create. Every leaf that falls becomes food for the next. Every bone is devoured by soil before time can carve its memory into stone. And yet in the silence between monsoon breaths, fragments remain. Stone flakes, bits of ochre, a tooth the size of a thumb. In the limestone caverns of Laos, Borneo, and the Philippines, archaeologists will one day uncover evidence that both Homo sapiens and Denisovans walked here, their tools intermingled, their presence indistinguishable. It is as though the forest itself refused to take sides. For hundreds of generations, these two humanities coexisted in this living cathedral, trading not through words, but through shared survival. The geography of this world was both bridge and barrier. When sea levels fell during the Ice Age, vast plains of land connected the islands we now call Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. The region became a colossal continent, Sunderland, stretching almost to Australia. But when the oceans rose again, the bridges drowned. What was once one world became many. Tribes were stranded species, isolated cultures, separated by salt. It was in these shifting lands that the fates of humans and Denisovans intertwined most deeply. Homo floresiensis, the hobbits of Flores Island, had already vanished or retreated into myth. But Denisovan descendants, their genes, their children, their whispers, remained scattered among these rain-choked islands. And from the west came Homo sapiens, bearing fire language and a mind hungry for dominion. Picture a river delta under monsoon light. The water runs brown and thick, filled with fallen petals and drifting ash. A group of Denisovan gatherers stand at the edge, their spears dark with sap, their faces painted with crushed berries. Across the river they see movement, pale skin, longer limbs, strangers whose tools gleam with strange precision. For a long time they watch each other across the water. Two reflections on opposite banks, one the echo, one the answer. No one moves. Then a bird cries out, sharp and sudden. The moment breaks. What happens next we can only imagine. Perhaps a gesture, the universal sign of peace, the offering of food or fire. Perhaps a misunderstanding that leads to blood. Evolution does not record the diplomacy of prehistory. But somewhere in that dense, steaming world, the first shared breath between the two kinds of human is taken. To live in the jungle is to surrender to rhythm. The rain dictates movement, humidity dictates life. Every creature learns the choreography of water. The Denisovans had long adapted to this performance. Their bodies were compact, conserving heat. Their skin likely darker, resistant to the sun's merciless glare. They built shelters of bamboo and palm raised on stilts to escape flooding. The Homo sapiens, by contrast, were inventors of pattern. They learned to map the chaos, to track migration routes of herds, to carve grooves in bone, for counting, to leave handprints on cave walls as if to say, I was here. I endured. It is within these rain-soaked shelters that the first shared offspring may have been born, hybrids of memory and promise, the synthesis of two evolutionary experiments. Their cries would blend with thunder, their skin, their lungs, their instincts, all mixed from the clay of two ancient worlds. At dawn, the rainforest erupts in sound. It is the closest thing to music the world has ever known. The rhythmic pulse of frogs, the syncopation of raindrops, the distant howls of gibbons swinging through fog. This soundscape is what shaped both kinds of human here. In the jungle, vision is limited, sight becomes secondary. Hearing becomes survival. The Denisovans would have developed acute auditory senses, learning to read meaning in sound, the crack of a branch, the silence of predators. The Homo sapiens who followed them evolved something more abstract, the ability to give names to these sounds to shape the jungle's chaos into song. From this, perhaps came the first lullabies, the first chants before a hunt, the first attempt to command the invisible through rhythm, and somewhere in the overlapping frequencies of survival and wonder, the earliest music of humanity was born. Unlike deserts, rainforests leave no scrolls, no tombs, no carvings of permanence. They erase their own history, but within that erasure something else thrives, continuity. For while the forest devours bones, it preserves genes. When modern scientists sequenced the DNA of the peoples of Melanesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Philippines, they found traces unmistakable ancient of Denisovan blood. Not fossils, not artifacts, but living proof that the rainforest remembers in flesh what it forgets in stone. Every villager in the highlands of New Guinea, every islander of the Bismarck Sea, carries within them the whisper of an ancestor who stood beneath this same endless rain, gazing through the mist at a world both alien and familiar. As millennia passed, Homo sapiens pressed ever farther eastward, guided by the promise of unknown coasts. Rafts carved from hollowed logs carried them across currents that shimmered like mercury. The ocean became the new frontier, a mirror that reflected the sky they had always feared and worshipped. They reached Sahul, the ancient supercontinent of Australia, and New Guinea, tens of thousands of years before modern historians once believed possible. And there, in the uplands of what is now Papua, the Denisovan legacy found its last home. On those ridges high above the canopy, the descendants of two humanities built fires together. The smell of roasted tubers mixed with the resin of burning wood. And though their languages were separate, their hearts beat to the same rhythm, the rhythm of survival. In the present day, geneticists trace these ancient migrations not through fossils, but through algorithms. In sterile laboratories, machines hum softly, sequencing fragments of bone powder, so small they could vanish on a fingertip. From these sequences, patterns emerge not of bloodlines, but of meetings. Every shared mutation is a breadcrumb left across tens of thousands of years. They tell us that the Denisovan story did not end in Siberia. It flourished here in the tropics long after the mountains fell silent. It mingled, transformed, adapted. The rainforest, once thought to be a graveyard of fossils, became instead a cradle of genetic memory. There is another theory, quite speculative, almost heretical. It suggests that Denisovans may have survived longer than we think, that in some remote corner of Indonesia or Melanesia, isolated by mountains and mist, their bloodlines persisted for millennia. Perhaps they lived in small bands merging slowly with the new arrivals. Perhaps the myths of forest spirits, small and powerful, half human and half animal, are memories of them. Every culture in this region tells of ancient people who lived deep in the jungle, emerging only at dusk, eyes shining like amber. The Ifugao of the Philippines call them umang. The Papuans speak of the kalo. The Malay tell of the orang pendek, the short ones. These stories may not be mere folklore. They may be the last songs of a vanished humanity. Listen closely to the rain. It is the same sound they heard, the same rhythm that lulled their children to sleep, that washed over their dead, that erased their footprints and polished their bones into memory. Rain connects all epochs. It does not care for species or time or empire. It falls on skulls of Denisovan, on the shelters of Homo sapiens, on the stone graves of archaeologists who later uncover them both. And through it all, life persists, unbroken, unjudging. Somewhere in that prehistoric jungle, a Homo sapiens and a Denisovan woman might have stood together beneath a dripping canopy, watching lightning split the horizon. They could not name the sky, but they could feel its power. Their fingers brushed, and for a heartbeat the boundary between species dissolved. In that gesture lies everything that would come after art, worship, love, betrayal. The story of how one species absorbed another, not through cruelty alone, but through connection. Perhaps that is the truest definition of humanity: to merge, to remember, to dream together before the rain washes it all away. Even now, the jungles of Southeast Asia hold secrets we have not yet unearthed. caves, still unopened sediments, untouched genomes unsung. Every expedition finds new surprises: a tooth in Laos, older than expected; a jaw in Sumatra, unlike any known species. It is possible that the Denisovans are not entirely gone, not as ghosts, but as genetic constellations scattered across the living. For evolution is not a line, but a song, and every voice that has ever sung remains faintly in the harmony. Night returns. Mist thickens. The forest exhales. A single ember glows beneath a leaf shelter, the last fire of that shared world. Around it, the children of both lineages drift into sleep, their breaths rising like fog, their dreams tangled in the vines of time. Tomorrow, some will hunt. Some will move south toward islands that do not yet exist. Some will stay unaware that they carry the future inside them, a future that will one day look back and name them Denisovans, sapiens, ancestor kin, and the rain will fall soft as memory. There is a moment in prehistory when survival becomes memory and memory becomes meaning. When flame is no longer just warmth against the cold, but a light cast upon the walls of the mind. This is that moment. 50,000 years ago, somewhere between Borneo and Sulawesi, the night inside a cave turns into a theatre of revelation. The fire crackles, smoke curls upward, staining the ceiling black. A human Homo sapiens crouches beside the wall. In one hand, a reed tube filled with ochre dust. In the other, a sense that has no name, yet the urge to make something eternal. He places his hand against the stone, breathes, and blows. Pigment explodes outward, leaving the negative shape of a palm, a signature not of ownership but of existence. It is the first true act of art. And it is here, among the humid caves of Indonesia, that the boundaries between Homo sapiens and the Denisovans fade into the colors of the earth itself. Tens of thousands of years later, archaeologists will stumble into that same cavern, Leang Timpuseng, and shine artificial light upon the walls. There, in the still air, the handprints bloom crimson under their lamps. Nearby, a faint outline of a wild pig emerges, drawn with iron oxide and water, older than any known painting in Europe. The discovery will shake the chronology of art. It will whisper that civilization did not begin in the West. It began wherever imagination first reached out in the dark and left a mark. But who made these paintings? The evidence suggests Homo sapiens. Yet in their blood there flowed the essence of Denisovans, the mingled inheritance of two humanities that had long ago shared breath beneath the jungle rain. Perhaps the artist was both. Perhaps that handprint belongs to a being who was neither entirely sapiens nor entirely other, a hybrid who carried two worlds inside one mind. Before words there were gestures, before gestures there was flame. Every night the early humans and their Denisovan kin would gather around firelight, watching shadows dance across stone. Those shadows moved like animals, the silhouettes of mammoths, wild pigs, the lean forms of hunters. In that flicker of motion, the first stories were told, not with grammar, but with rhythm, not with speech, but with imitation. The raised spear, the mimed pursuit, the gasp of triumph. This was the cinema of the Paleolithic world: light, movement, and silence. The fire became a projector, the cave, a screen, the tribe, an audience of breathing hearts. And somewhere in that hypnotic glow, consciousness deepened. A spark leaped from instinct to imagination. The world was no longer simply seen, it was remembered. Long after their disappearance, Denisovans still shaped the hands that shaped art. Their genetic gifts, endurance in cold, strength in bone, oxygen-rich blood, gave Homo sapiens the ability to survive at altitudes and climates where imagination could flourish unbroken. It is no coincidence that some of the earliest known art appears in regions where Denisovan DNA is strongest. The shared offspring of both species carried not only physical resilience, but perhaps something subtler, a bridge of perception. For creativity is not an invention, it is an inheritance, a synthesis of memory and necessity, shaped by those who endured before us. Ochre, the pigment of the earth, is more than decoration. It is the oldest evidence of symbolic thought. Across continents, from the caves of Blombos in Africa to the cliffs of Sulawesi, humans ground this mineral into dust, mixed it with spit and animal fat, and painted the world red. Red, the color of blood, of sunrise of life leaving the body. It is the universal human constant, a shade both sacred and visceral. When the Denisovans' descendants and Homo sapiens met in the islands, both already understood the meaning of red. Perhaps they painted themselves before the hunt. Perhaps they marked their dead, staining flesh to guide the spirit. Perhaps for a fleeting moment they stood side by side, their hands stained alike, their minds joined in that quiet, wordless awe before the wall. In modern laboratories, the dust of that ancient pigment is studied under microscopes. Spectrographs reveal the minerals. Radiometric dating counts the half-lives of isotopes. But science in its deepest truth is also art. Every measurement is a question, every discovery a resurrection. When researchers uncover a handprint 45,000 years old, they are not just uncovering art, they are uncovering intent. That is the true miracle of archaeology, not bones, but minds preserved in gesture. One scientist once said the first artists did not invent art, they invented forever. The dawn of art did not come suddenly. It unfolded across millennia through carvings, pigments, and songs that drifted into the dark. The humans of this age began to sculpt small figurines from bone and shell. They pierced animal teeth and strung them into necklaces. They collected shells from the sea-drilled holes and wore them as symbols. Each act, though simple, carried an invisible meaning, a step toward abstraction, the birth of culture. And what of the Denisovans, their own artifacts? The polished green bracelet from Denisova cave. The carefully shaped tools reveal a mind capable of precision and beauty. Perhaps they too had begun to sense art's power, though their form of expression is lost to us. Together the two species created a silent revolution, a flowering of meaning beneath the canopy of time. Art changes everything. It is not merely decoration, it is cognition made visible. Once humans began to create symbols, they could no longer live as animals. A handprint meant, I was here. A painted beast meant, I saw this. I conquered it. I am aware. The first artist is the first philosopher, and the first philosopher is the first exile condemned to see beyond instinct, to dream of things that do not yet exist. Thus, with a single exhalation of ochre dust, humanity crossed an invisible threshold. The world became both real and imagined. And the imagined world, that flickering sacred hallucination, would become stronger than the stone beneath it. For every discovery there are 1,000 losses. We know that the Denisovans once carved tools and shaped jewelry, but their language, if they had one, is gone. Their myths, their laughter, their fears, erased like charcoal in the rain. And yet perhaps they live on, not in words, but in influence. In the hybrid children who inherited their quiet strength. In the mountain tribes who still sing songs of stone, ancestors who taught them the way of fire. The past is not dead, it is buried inside us. Every time an artist lifts a brush, every time a child traces a handprint in mud, they are repeating a gesture first made by beings who have no names in our languages. There is something sacred in the act of painting inside a cave. To enter such darkness with only fire to guide you, to crawl through tunnels, to touch the breath of the earth, is to face creation itself. These early humans were not decorating, they were summoning. They painted animals not as they looked, but as they felt, powerful, ghostly, alive. The cave became a womb of rebirth, the wall a membrane between worlds. In that silence, art and religion were born together. The divine entered through pigment and firelight. And in the shadows, two species, sapiens and Denisovan, merged into a single mythology, the human. Imagine standing there tens of millennia ago. You hold a torch. The smoke blurs your vision. Before you, the shapes of beasts and hands move with the flicker of flame alive, breathing, watching you back. You do not yet know what it means to pray, but something in your chest rises like tide water. You reach out, touch the rock and feel its coolness. You press your hand against it. When you remove it, You see what you've made, the absence of your hand glowing in red dust. That absence is presence. That silence is voice. That void is art. And though you cannot name it, you have given birth to something immortal. Tens of thousands of years later, your descendants will find your handprint and feel the same pull, a recognition beyond language. They will not see species or subspecies, not bones or genes. They will see themselves. In that moment, time collapses. A scientist kneeling in a cave in 2019 and an artist crouching there in 48,000 BCE share the same gesture, the same awe. They are separated by epochs but united by meaning. This is what art does, it abolishes extinction. The night outside the cave burns with insects and storm. Inside the fire guttering near the wall grows dim. The painted animals shimmer in its dying glow. A child, one of the hybrids of this mingled world, looks at them and sees something new. Motion, frozen in stillness, a concept impossible before this night. He will grow old and his kind will spread across continents. The image of the hand, the animal, the hunt will travel with them, carried like a code in memory and dream. And though the Denisovans vanish, their contribution to this awakening will never fade, for through them the art survives in blood, the unspoken inheritance of wonder. Every fire we light today is the echo of that first one. Every poem, every song, every digital screen glowing in the night is another wall painted in another kind of cave. The world has changed its materials, not its essence. We are still huddled in the dark, making light with our hands, hoping it means something. And perhaps in that yearning, we are closest to our ancestors, the quiet Denisovans, the dreaming Homo sapiens, who once believed that painting a hand upon a wall could keep time itself from swallowing them. When the rain returns, and it always does, it washes over the caves, the hills, the jungles. It erases footprints, but not meaning. The pigments fade, but the idea remains that to create is to resist oblivion. And so as thunder rolls above the forest and lightning flashes across the ancient sea, one truth endures through every species, every extinction, every rediscovery. We are not separate. We are continuations of each other, echoes passed through fire, pigment, and breath. The hand on the wall still reaches forward through millennia, through evolution, through us. The storm has passed. The air smells of wet earth, of smoke and sap, of something both burned and reborn. Across the ancient savannas of Sunderland, dawn unfolds like a slow revelation, sunlight-piercing mist illuminating footprints half filled with rainwater. The world is quiet except for the low hum of insects. The trees glisten, the rivers are swollen and slow, and somewhere among the dripping branches a figure kneels at the edge of a pond. For the first time a human stares into reflection. He does not yet understand what he sees, that the face gazing back belongs to himself. He touches the surface and watches it ripple, watches the image dissolve and return. The moment passes like lightning, a spark of consciousness, fleeting yet irreversible. For to recognize one's own reflection is to recognize one's separateness from the world, to stand apart from the forest, the beast, and the sky. And from that moment on, humanity begins to ask questions that the earth itself cannot answer. Once hunger and fear were enough. To eat, to sleep, to breed, to fight, these were the laws that shaped survival. But now, under the slow rhythm of seasons, another hunger emerges, the hunger for meaning. The early Homo sapiens and the last of the Denisovans begin to sense what no other creature can, that life is fragile, fleeting, and bound by time. They do not yet have words for death, but they feel its shadow. When a child falls ill and grows still, they do not simply walk away. They linger, they watch, they weep, they cover the body with leaves. Sometimes they place stones over it, not to protect from predators, but from forgetting. This is the dawn of reverence, the beginning of something sacred. In a limestone cave in Central Asia, small body lies curled like a sleeping animal. Beside it rests a piece of ochre, a fragment of antler, and a stone blade dulled by touch. No one will know their names, but archaeologists, tens of thousands of years later, will know their hearts. For in that burial lies intention, a recognition that death deserves ritual. And ritual means remembrance. Perhaps the Denisovans buried their own in similar ways. We may never know. But the instinct to preserve, to mark the passage from life into mystery, unites them both. It is the first theology written not in scripture, but in soil. Night after night, our ancestors begin to look upward. The same stars shine, but no longer as mere light. Now they are eyes, ancestors, spirits. Around the fire, someone begins to point at constellations, the hunter, the serpent, the woman, carrying fire. And though the stories differ, their rhythm is the same. We come from somewhere and we will return somewhere. This is the oldest faith of all, not in gods, but in continuity, in the endless return of things. The Denisovans once breathed the same air, and now their oxygen-carrying genes flow through the blood of mountain tribes. Perhaps in this unseen inheritance, the cosmos itself finds balance, the lost returning through the living. As the tribes spread, as language deepens, so too does reflection. The humans begin to name what they cannot see: the wind, the spirit, the dream. Every gust of air becomes the breath of something unseen. Every echo in the cave becomes the voice of the dead. Fear gives birth to reverence, and reverence to philosophy. The world becomes a living being, vast and awake. And in the flicker of the fire they begin to sense themselves as both its children and its burden. Imagine now the edge of an ancient coastline where Sumatra meets the open sea. A lone man sits watching the tide pull back into the dark. He holds a piece of driftwood, carving lines into it without reason, lines that intersect and repeat, spiraling toward an unseen center. He does not know it, but he is inventing symbol. The pattern he etches is neither useful nor ornamental. It is meditation, the external shape of an internal storm. Perhaps he is thinking of the child he buried. Perhaps he is remembering the strangers from the north, the Denisovan hunters who vanished into the forest years ago. Or perhaps, without language to frame it, he is contemplating the same thing we do now. Why am I here? By this age, the Denisovans are ghosts in the genetic fabric of humankind. Their last true tribes may have disappeared, but their essence remains in lungs adapted to thin air, in bones built for endurance, in instincts carried quietly forward. And yet some ancient part of Homo sapiens remembers them not by name but by myth. Across Asia and Oceania, every culture holds stories of those who came before, beings who lived in caves, who were strong, quiet and mysterious. In some tales they are gods, in others monsters, but in all they are family. Memory transforms fact into meaning and meaning into myth. The Denisovans live on not through fossils, but through imagination, the most immortal force evolution ever created. When humans first began to dream, they crossed a second threshold of consciousness. For in dreams they found both the dead and the divine. They dreamed of animals that spoke, of ancestors walking across fire, of mountains that breathed. They dreamed of their lost cousins, the silent hunters of the highlands, and woke weeping, unable to say why. Dreams became messages. Sleep became a temple. In this shared theater of the mind, the boundaries between species dissolved completely. The Denisovan, the sapiens, the yet unborn modern human, all became actors in the same eternal play. Archaeologists call it symbolic behavior. Philosophers call it self-awareness. But to the firelit humans of this epoch, it is something simpler: wonder. They begin to decorate the world not out of vanity, but out of longing. Shell beads gleam against skin darkened by sun and ash. Animal teeth hang from cords of woven grass. The body itself becomes canvas, moving art, walking myth. In these gestures lies the human paradox, the desire to belong to nature, and the equal desire to transcend it. We adorn ourselves because we know instinctively that we will die. Adornment is protest beauty hurled into the face of time. The scientists of our era can trace this awakening in the strata of caves and the calculus of genes. They can tell when pigments first appeared, when burial became intentional, when DNA crossed between species. But there is one thing science cannot fully measure: the moment the human mind began to question. Not the first word, not the first tool, but the first doubt. That doubt was the seed of everything: art, religion, philosophy, science itself. The question that cracked open the universe. What am I? It is the same question whispered by a Denisovan child staring at a thunderstorm 50 millennia ago, and by the astrophysicist peering into the birth of galaxies today. Time changes language, but not the need to know. On the island of Sulawesi, rain feeds rivers that twist through jungle and limestone. The humans follow these rivers like veins through the body of the earth. At every bend they leave traces, hearths, shells, carvings. Each campfire becomes a neuron in the planet's growing brain. Each idea a current of thought moving across continents. In this way, consciousness itself migrates. It spreads like a tide, like dawn creeping over water. And everywhere it flows, it carries the ghostlight of those who came before. It begins with breath. When the dead no longer breathe, the living notice the stillness. Somewhere deep in that realization, the idea of the soul, is born the unseen thing that leaves when breath does. They cannot see it, but they can feel its absence. So they imagine it rising through trees, through rain, into the stars. And so the universe fills with souls, human, animal, forest, fire. Everything becomes alive again, everything connected. This belief will one day evolve into religion, philosophy, and ethics, but here in the heart of prehistory, it is only love, refusing to let go. Every night when the flames dance and fade, the tribe gathers in silence. Children fall asleep against their mother's arms. The elders stare into the embers, lost in thought. One of them stirs the ashes with a stick. Sparks rise, brief, beautiful, dying mid-air. He watches, mesmerized. He understands something wordless, that life is like those sparks. And yet each spark lights another. From one flame come 1,000. He smiles, the first philosopher. In this age of reflection, the humans begin to listen differently. The wind through the valley becomes a language. The rumble of thunder becomes an omen. The cry of an animal becomes a message. They start to see patterns, repetition, rhythm, cause and effect. Fire burns, rain heals, stars move and return. They do not yet know the word science, but its roots are already growing. To observe is to worship. To remember is to know. Knowledge begins not in certainty, but in wonder. Far to the north, in the shadow of the Altai, the last Denisovan tribes fade into silence. The glaciers return, the forests shrink, and the mountains grow lonely again. But their legacy remains in genes, in myths, in the quiet persistence of humanity's own reflection. One day, tens of thousands of years later, when modern humans uncover their bones, we will see ourselves in them. We will call them primitive, yet feel an ache of recognition. For we know that their extinction is only one half of our survival. The mirror they left us is made of ash, and we still look into it. When the stars rise above the rainforest, when the fires die, when silence returns, one truth remains. We are creatures haunted by our own awareness. We remember too much. We dream too deeply. We ask why the sky moves, why the heart aches, why the dead do not return. And though we build temples, machines and empires, the question never leaves us. It is carved into the genome, etched in ochre, whispered in the wind. It began here, in the age when humans first looked into the mirror of water and saw time looking back. A woman kneels by a dying fire. She gathers the ashes in her hands, lets them fall like grey snow. Behind her, the jungle hums. Above her, the stars burn. She breathes deeply, and in her breath lives the memory of every species that ever wondered, every mind that ever reflected. Tomorrow her children will travel farther, carry light to new continents, build worlds we cannot imagine. But tonight, in this quiet between storms, humanity pauses, caught between beast and god life, and eternity, the known and the infinite. And in that fragile stillness, the earth itself seems to whisper, "You have learned to see yourselves." The age of wondering becomes the age of shaping. For tens of thousands of years, thought has ripened in the dark like fruit. Now the mind begins to reach outward, no longer content to watch or worship, but to change. Stone becomes structure, fire becomes weapon, Imagination once painted on walls is carved into the face of the earth. From the floodplains of Sunda to the high plateaus of Central Asia, the descendants of every vanished kind of human sapiens, Neanderthal, Denisovan, begin to leave signatures of mastery. The world for the first time bends to will. It starts with sound, a rhythm of stone striking stone, flint on flint, thought on thought. Sparks leap and the rhythm becomes method, each blow sharper, more deliberate. The first blades appear sleek and symmetrical. Every curve anticipates motion, every edge the ghost of a future purpose. When the Denisovans shaped their tools, they did so with strength. When Homo sapiens shaped theirs, they did so with thought. Now the two inheritances fuse precision, joined with patience, calculation, born from endurance. A spear point is not a weapon, it is a decision, the decision to rewrite the balance between hunter and hunted. In this new world, movement becomes destiny. The rains shift, herds migrate, and the tribes follow. From the jungles of the archipelago, the descendants of mixed bloodlines press north toward open plains and east toward the endless Pacific. They carry memory in objects, obsidian blades wrapped in bark strings of shell that sing when the wind blows through them, seeds sealed in clay. They also carry something invisible, an idea that has only just been born. We can go anywhere. Boats of hollowed logs ride currents that no other species has ever dared. The ocean ceases to be a barrier. It becomes a road. Every island reached is a prophecy fulfilled. The horizon no longer confines the human mind. It invites it. Fire, once sacred, becomes servant. It cooks, hardens, cauterizes, warns. But mastery breeds blindness. The same flame that guards can destroy, the same warmth that nurtures can devour forests. One night, a campfire spreads into dry grass. The wind catches it and a valley burns. The next morning, the ashes reveal blackened fruit, cracked nuts, roasted tubers. Accident becomes discovery, and so begins the cycle that will define the species' era, transformed into advantage, destruction refined into knowledge. The earth, for the first time, feels the heat of intention. Caves are no longer enough. The tribes learn to weave branches, to stake poles, to thatch roofs against the rain. Shelter becomes symbol, an external body protecting the internal one. But architecture does something else. It teaches abstraction. A house must be imagined before it exists. To build is to think in time, to hold a future in the mind and drag it into the present. The Denisovan strength of endurance fuses with the sapiens' gift for vision. From that union rises the first civilization in embryo. The forest becomes blueprint, the mind becomes tool. They begin to carve not only stone but meaning. Symbols appear, marks on antler, on shell, on clay. At first, no one understands them, but the marks repeat, and repetition breeds recognition. Lines become codes, codes become memory externalized. This is writing in its embryonic form, not yet alphabet, but thought made visible. The first transaction between mind and matter. And within those grooves, the ancestors of science are born. With mastery comes risk. The more humans shape the world, the more they depend on what they shape. They clear patches of forest for tubers and fruit, and the soil, once generous, turns thin. They follow herds too far, and famine follows them back. For the first time, knowledge and suffering grow together. The earth gives, then teaches restraint. To survive, they must learn rhythm, season, migration, rest. A lesson written not in words, but in scars. Across continents, Homo sapiens spread like fire. Wherever they go, the older species fade, Neanderthal, Denisovan, the unknown. But disappearance does not mean defeat. The survivors of those vanished kinds remain within us, silent, molecular, immortal. Every heartbeat carries their cadence, every adaptation their design. Through us they continue the conquest they began. Yet there is unease in the triumph. Each extinction leaves an echo, an emptiness beneath the new music of human expansion. In the stillness between hunts, some begin to sense what they have lost, the quiet companionship of others like themselves, different yet kin. Dominion tastes of ash. One night a hunter dreams. He stands upon a ridge watching the valley blaze not from lightning or accident, but from his own torches. Animals flee, forests fall, and the air roars with heat. When he wakes, his chest trembles with awe and guilt. He does not yet know it, but he has glimpsed the future, the paradox of power. Every discovery doubles back upon its maker. To master the world is to inherit its weight. From this dream is born the instinct of conscience, the subtle awareness that strength demands care. It will take millennia for that thought to find language, but its seed is here. Patterns multiply. Hearthstones arranged in circles, storage pits spaced evenly apart, fish traps built with precision that imitates geometry. Unseen, the mind is inventing number. Counting begins with fingers, then with pebbles, then with memory. 3 fish, 5 days, 10 steps. Time itself becomes measurable, repeatable, a rhythm of survival turned into concept. Every calculation is a small defiance of chaos. Every tally a whisper, I understand. Sound too evolves. From chant to rhythm, from rhythm to melody. Bones hollowed into flutes, stretched hides beaten into drums. Music becomes a map of the unseen, a structure where emotion finds pattern. When a child dies, the tribe sings not only grief, but continuity. When the rains return, they sing gratitude, shaped by harmony. It is in these vibrations that the human spirit begins to recognize itself, not as flesh, but as resonance. Perhaps this is the true inheritance of all species that came before the instinct to turn existence into song. Fireblade, shelter language, all converge towards something invisible, consciousness aware of itself as creator. The tribe gathers one evening beside a great river. Their faces glow with reflected light. Someone tells a story not of beasts or storms, but of why. Why the stars move, why the heart beats, why fire lives and dies. The story is wrong, but the act is right. The need to explain becomes stronger than the need to know. It is this need that will one day give birth to myth, to science, to the endless dialogue between reason and wonder. Every step forward leaves a shadow. They learn to burn fields for planting, and in doing so they scar the soil. They hunt too many, and the herds vanish. They hoard food, and envy awakens. Progress is a double-edged tool. Every invention invents a new danger. But the mind adapts faster than the damage it causes. In the wake of scarcity comes cooperation. In the face of fear, they discover empathy, the oldest social technology of all. They begin to see themselves not as individuals, but as part of something larger, fragile, living. The earth begins to mirror their thoughts, and their thoughts begin to mirror the earth. Generations pass, the forests thin, the fires spread, the skies clear with strange new light. Humanity has become a geological force, a species that leaves signatures deeper than rivers. Caves once used for refuge now hold rituals. Stones once shaped for tools are stacked for meaning. The first monuments rise not vast, but deliberate rings of stone pillars of bone. Each one declares a truth older than empire. We can make the world remember us. This is the birth of history, the moment the future becomes an object of desire. With every act of creation comes prophecy. The ancestors do not know it, but in shaping the earth, they are shaping their own destiny. They have inherited from Denisovans endurance, from Neanderthals strength, from sapiens imagination. Together these gifts form the triad of humanity's fate to endure beyond reason, to build beyond need, to dream beyond wisdom. The same qualities that lift us above the beasts will someday threaten all creation. But in this moment, this shimmering dawn of mastery, such futures are only whispers in the smoke. The tribe sings. The river glows with starlight. The world seems infinite, forgiving, eternal. The night grows cold again. An elder stirs the embers, watching their color shift from gold to crimson to gray. He feels the same awe the first humans felt before fire, the same guilt the hunter felt in his dream. He lifts a burning branch and presses it into the dirt, tracing a spiral. Around it, the others gather, children, women, men, silent watching. The spiral glows briefly, then fades into ash. No one speaks yet. Everyone understands the line continues even when unseen. So will they. Tomorrow they will move onward, carry fire to new lands, carve meaning into mountains. The world will never be the same again. Far above them, the Milky Way stretches across the sky like a trail of ancient embers. Every star reflects a fire below. Every fire mirrors a star above. Between humanity has awakened not just to survive, but to shape. And in doing so, it has stepped across another invisible threshold from creature of the earth to creator within it. The transformation is complete, though the cost is only beginning to unfold. Time no longer moves in straight lines. It coils like smoke, folds like water, returning again and again to its own source. Across the widening continents, the grandchildren of every vanished human lineage wander under the same patient sky. They no longer know where the first fire was lit or whose hands taught the world to dream, yet the memory remains half felt, half heard, in stories murmured beside rivers. Each generation drinks from the same currents that once carried the ashes of the Denisovans, the bones of Neanderthals, the footprints of forgotten cousins. Water is the first historian. It does not speak, it repeats. When they cup their hands to drink, they taste ancestry. By now the names are gone. In their place live myths, the people of the mountains who could breathe where others suffocated, the children of stone who sang to rocks until they softened and became tools, the small ones of the forest who vanished when thunder learned to speak. Across Melanesia, across Siberia, across the steppes, such legends multiply. They are not memories in the strict sense. They are fossils of remembrance stories, evolved the way bones evolve, reshaped by need and imagination. The people who tell them do not know they are describing extinct species. They think they are speaking of spirits, and perhaps they are right. Tens of thousands of years later, scientists in white rooms will search blood for these same ghosts. They will find them tiny fragments of code, folded into every cell, molecular whispers that defy extinction. Each sequence of Denisovan DNA will read like a line of poetry translated from a dead language. In the bodies of Tibetans, the code that allows them to breathe thin air. In the immune systems of islanders, the code that teaches the body to remember the jungle's poison. The genome is not a museum, it is an echo chamber. Every discovery will confirm what myth already knew, that no species ever truly disappears. It only changes the pitch of its voice. In Papua, the rainforest never stops speaking. Its language is the hiss of rain, the call of birds, the slow percussion of fruit falling on wet leaves. The tribes who live there move through it as through an orchestra of ghosts. They listen more than they see. They can name a creature by its sound before they glimpse its form. To them, every echo is alive. When thunder rolls, they say it is the laughter of the before people playing drums inside the mountain. When a sudden wind sweeps through the canopy, they say it is the breath of those who came before, warning them to remember. The jungle keeps their mythology fresh like sap that never hardens. Elsewhere, far to the west, ice retreats and returns. The glacial rhythm erases borders, redraws maps. Generations migrate without knowing they are following the same paths as their ancestors. A hunter crosses a valley newly revealed by melting ice. He finds a cave where the walls are carved with shapes he cannot interpret. Circles, spirals, handprints. He feels a pulse in the stone, as though the rock itself remembers the warmth of those long vanished. He kneels, touches a print, and feels his own hand fit perfectly inside it. For a moment, time folds. The first maker and the last witness share one gesture. He does not know the word for déjà vu, but he knows the feeling of belonging to something too vast to name. The tribes that move between mountains and sea begin to exchange not only goods but memories. A shell from one shore travels hundreds of miles inland, carrying with it the smell of salt and myth. A story about a god who carved men from mud drifts east, changing with every retelling until it becomes a story about a woman who painted life into stone. Through trade, myth evolves faster than flesh. By the time it crosses an ocean, it has turned into history. The humans who speak these tales no longer recall the Denisovans, but their legends bear the same structure: a creation, a fall, a merging. It is the pattern of biology rewritten as narrative, evolution retold as folklore. At night, when the campfires bloom across the plains like stars fallen to earth, the storytellers begin their work. They chant of origins of beings made from smoke, of lovers carved from clay, of wars fought between sky and stone. Each story ends the same way: we are their children. The listeners nod not in belief, but in recognition. They feel it in the marrow, the sense that humanity is plural, that the self is a coalition. They do not know the term genetic inheritance, but they understand it spiritually. In their myths, the before people did not vanish. They became the veins of the world. They turned into rivers, mountains, and firelight. Every flame carries an ancestor's breath. Fast forward tens of millennia, the descendants of these tribes will map the stars, split the atom, and decode the genome. In sterile halls of glass and light, they will resurrect the past molecule by molecule. When they sequence the Denisovan genome in the early 21st century, they will stare at screens glowing with the same awe as the first humans staring into fire. What they will see is not data, but continuity, a chorus of extinct voices woven into their own flesh. Science too will become a form of remembering, each discovery another verse in the same long elegy. But here in this prehistoric moment, the dream exists in simpler form. A child sleeps near a fire. He dreams of strangers with heavy brows and amber eyes walking through fog. He dreams they hand him a spark of light and disappear into trees. When he wakes, he tells the story. The elders nod solemnly. They add it to the night's litany. Dream becomes doctrine. Doctrine becomes heritage. Without realizing it, they preserve the very species their bloodline replaced. As language matures, certain people become its guardians. They do not hunt or build, they remember. They are the first historians, the keepers of what the tribe cannot afford to forget. Each carries a repertoire of names, ancestors, and places. When one dies, another inherits the tale, reciting until breath becomes memory. In time, these oral genealogies will stretch so far back they will blur into mythic epochs: the age of giants, the age of smoke, the age when men met fire. Within those blurred centuries hides a truth: the age of many humans, when the world held not one species, but a chorus. The story keepers will not call it anthropology. They will call it origin. The first megaliths rise not for gods, but for remembrance. Circles of stone align with sunrise and solstice calendars, built by hands that once painted animals in caves. At their centers, fire still burns. Its smoke curls upward, joining the clouds, carrying prayers to those who vanished. Each stone sings when the wind passes through its cracks. Some nights the sound resembles a low human moan. The people believe it is the mountain remembering. They name the place the Temple of Echoes. When archaeologists uncover it tens of thousands of years later, they will measure alignments, record acoustics, and write academic papers. But they will not hear what the builders heard: the whisper of extinct blood calling from beneath the soil. Something new has grown from this web of myth and survival empathy. The hunter, who once saw only prey, now feels sorrow when he kills. The mother who buries her child carves a small figure from clay and keeps it near the hearth. The tribe that once feared strangers now greets them with ritual exchange. In remembering others, both living and lost, humans learn to recognize themselves. This is the true inheritance of mingled species, the capacity for reflection turned outward. Compassion is the most advanced technology the world has ever produced. A storm comes from the east, flattening grass, twisting trees. Lightning ignites the horizon. The tribe takes shelter in a cave. As thunder rolls through the mountains, one elder speaks softly. The ancestors are restless. He tells how in the beginning the before people lit the first fire, and the wind carried its smoke to the stars. When the stars blink, it is because the ancestors breathe. A child listens eyes wide. When the storm ends, he steps outside and looks upward. The clouds part. The night is clean. The Milky Way arches above him like a river of flame. He feels for the first time the strange vertigo of belonging to both earth and sky. The echo has reached him. Millennia will pass, cities will rise, the jungle will recede. Yet beneath the asphalt and iron, the pulse continues the ancient rhythm of adaptation and memory. In every modern act, every melody, every bridge, every spark of discovery, the voices of extinct kin murmur. They remind us that evolution never ends, it only changes medium. From pigment to symbol, from symbol to code, from code to gene, the echo deepens. The story retells itself with new language, but the theme remains constant. We remember because we are made of remembering. There comes an evening when all fires die down. The forest hums its nocturne. The sea sighs against the shore. A woman stands alone, feeling the night on her skin. She whispers the names. She knows her parents, her children, her tribe. And then, almost unconsciously, she adds one more, a name she does not remember learning. It feels old, foreign, heavy with dust. She says it again. It vibrates in her throat like music. The jungle answers with a gust of wind. Somewhere far beneath the soil, something stirs the long sleep of those who gave her breath. The boundary between past and present dissolves for an instant. The echo completes its circle. Dawn rises, mist threads through trees like pale smoke. Birds call from branches heavy with rain. The world looks new, yet everything in it is ancient. Every breath carries the residue of 1,000 vanished lives. Every heartbeat is a drumbeat begun long before the species that listens to it had a name. Somewhere in the distance a river whispers to the sea, nothing is ever truly gone. And from that whisper, humanity will build its next dream. Time exhales. After millennia of motion, the earth grows quiet again. Ice retreats into the poles. Seas find their beds. Forests reclaim valleys once charred by fire. Across continents, the restless energy of invention softens into rhythm. Tribes settle near rivers. The endless migration slows. Children grow up knowing the same horizon their parents once wandered toward. The world for a moment pauses, caught between the wildness of its birth and the order of what will come next. In that pause, something sacred takes root: stillness. It is the age before agriculture, before empire, before history shouts itself into stone. The age when silence still speaks louder than words. At the edge of a great river, in what will one day be northern China, reeds whisper in the wind. A cluster of shelters stands, simple domes of mud and woven grass. Smoke rises through the dawn mist, drifting like prayer. Within one hut, an old woman tends a small flame. Her hands are calloused from generations of making fire, yet her touch is tender. She hums softly a tune, older than her tribe, perhaps older than language itself. Outside, children play beside the water. They mimic bird calls, build figures from clay. When they laugh, the sound carries far, merging with the calls of cranes overhead. Nothing monumental happens here. And yet in this calm simplicity, humanity is rehearsing eternity, learning the delicate art of living with the earth instead of against it. For the first time, people begin to notice repetition, not as coincidence, but as pattern. The moon grows and shrinks in cycles. The sun returns to the same point on the horizon. The rains come, depart, and come again. They carve notches on bones to track these rhythms, primitive calendars, yet profound acts of recognition. Time itself becomes visible. But with awareness comes nostalgia. Once you can count the days, you can also miss them. The concept of loss is born alongside the concept of time. And so in the heart of peace, sorrow awakens quietly, a gentle ache for what is always passing. The people begin to plant. Not yet fields, not yet farms, but gardens of remembrance. They bury the dead beneath fruit trees so that each harvest feels like reunion. Seeds become symbols of return. The cycle of sprout, bloom, decay, and rebirth mirrors their own reflections on life. When they eat, they thank the soil by name. When they sleep, they dream of roots whispering stories underground. In the stillness of this age, humans begin to see that existence is not conquest, but communion. To live is to exchange breath with everything else that breathes. Far away, on an island in the southern Pacific, another tribe watches the sun drown in the sea. They sit in silence, the horizon glowing like the edge of a blade. An elder speaks at last. Once the world was filled with voices, he says. The before people spoke through thunder and wind, but now they rest. It is our turn to be quiet, so they may sleep. The others nod. They have learned that silence can be reverence. The less they take, the more they understand. As the last light fades, the ocean mirrors the sky, and for one heartbeat, everything water, air, flesh, and memory becomes one color gold. In our modern century, we will call this the late Pleistocene interlude. To the people living it, it is simply balance. Archaeologists will find few traces from these millennia, no great monuments, no mass graves, only small tools, shell ornaments, gentle evidence of a species at peace with itself. This absence of drama will confuse future scholars, but to the earth it will be a sigh of relief. The noise of evolution has softened into harmony. The planet has learned to breathe again. Under a canopy of stars, a young man lies awake listening to insects and wind. His people call him the listener. He has begun to notice something strange in dreams, patterns, repetitions, visions of people who do not exist in his waking world. They speak of fire, of oceans, of mountains of ice. They show him places his tribe has never seen. He wakes, trembling, unable to explain. He draws what he saw in the sand spirals, waves, figures of light. The others call him touched by spirits. They do not know he is experiencing something we might now call imagination, reaching across generations, ancestral memory, echoing through blood. In the stillness of this world, the mind turns inward and finds infinity. Across the continents, dreams become the new language of meaning. The shamans, the seers, the poets of the Paleolithic learn to navigate these inner rivers. They teach that the world we see is only one layer of reality. Beneath it lies the dreaming, a realm where ancestors walk and the past never dies. Every hunt, every storm, every illness is first fought there. Reality itself becomes participatory, a dialogue between waking and dream. Science will one day call it psychology. Religion will call it revelation. But here in the hush of early humanity, it is simply listening. There are fewer conflicts now. Tribes no longer clash over territory as fiercely as before. The abundance of the interglacial world has made generosity possible. Instead of building walls, they build paths. Instead of warring, they trade. Their stories grow gentler. The heroes of this age are not hunters or warriors, but healers, those who can mend bone, soothe fever, deliver birth. Even the animals grow calmer. The wolves approach the fires at night, drawn not by hunger, but curiosity. The humans feed them scraps, unaware they are forging the first alliance of domestication. Out of quiet companionship, civilization begins. It is said that one night, when the moon hung red above the hills, a young girl sat alone on a slope of grass and began to sing. She did not know where the melody came from. It rose from her chest like smoke from the earth. The wind caught her song and carried it across the plain. Other voices joined. Soon the entire valley echoed with harmony, a choir of breath of living wind. The next morning, the elders named the place the hill that sings. When archaeologists discover it 40,000 years later, they will find only stones aligned in strange patterns, each humming faintly when wind passes through. They will call it coincidence. But it was music, the first collective act of beauty, performed for no purpose but joy. High in the mountains of Tibet, where the air thins to near nothing, a lone traveler kneels before a cave mouth. Inside, snow has sealed the entrance. He feels the weight of altitude pressing on his lungs, but he does not suffocate. He breathes easily, as though the mountain itself is helping him. He does not know that deep in his blood, a Denisovan gene is keeping him alive. He will never know that he carries within him the final proof that extinction is not an ending. The cave behind him hums faintly when wind passes through its hollows. Perhaps it is only air. Perhaps it is a sigh. Either way, the mountain remembers its children. By now the continents have settled into shapes we would recognize. The ice ages retreat for the last time. The world warms, grasslands shimmer, coasts widen. Humanity stands everywhere, from the tundra to the tropics, from desert to island. And for a brief, astonishing span of time, there is balance. No species threatens them, no catastrophe looms. They belong entirely to the planet, and the planet belongs entirely to them. The noise of creation fades into harmony. The earth hums like a drum, slowly falling silent after a song. At twilight, an elder sits before the hearth. He stares into the flames without thought. Around him, the tribe sleeps. He remembers his grandmother's stories of the before people, of the first fire, of the time when humans were many. He knows those tales are not literal, but he feels their truth. He feels them in his bones, in the slow pulse of warmth beneath his ribs. He takes a stick and traces a spiral into the ash. For a moment, he imagines the universe itself, breathing, expanding, contracting, living. When the last ember fades, he smiles. To him, darkness is not loss, it is completion. Thousands of years later, our archaeologists will call this epoch the Great Pause. They will search for evidence of violence and find none. They will debate how a species once so restless could live so long in peace. They will not understand that this serenity was not ignorance but wisdom. Humanity had learned the balance between knowing and being. In that stillness, art and thought intertwined. Every handprint, every flute, every whisper of myth was an act of gratitude, the earth speaking through flesh, saying, "I exist and I remember." Every calm holds a secret tension. The seeds of change germinate beneath still water. Soon the world will shift again. The first cities will rise. The first plough will cut the soil. The first written word will bind time to page. But tonight there is only silence. The tribe sleeps. The fire sighs. The stars drift slowly across a sky so clear it feels like glass. Somewhere beyond sight, rivers carve the future. Somewhere beneath the earth, forgotten bones dream of return. The world is poised between breath and exhalation, between remembrance and silence. The morning light spills across the plain. Mist coils through reeds glowing gold. For one perfect moment, the earth is whole, the children of every vanished lineage alive within one heartbeat. No war, no hunger, no ambition, only awareness. A bird takes flight from the water's edge, rising into the warmth. Its shadow glides across the huts, across the sleeping tribe, across the endless grass. And as it vanishes into the dawn, the wind carries the faintest echo, half song, half prayer. Be still. Remember, you are the earth dreaming of itself. At first the silence endures, then barely audible, a new murmur rises from the soil. It is the sound of roots breaking through rock of water, carving a channel of thought, becoming architecture. The stillness of millennia begins to stir. Humanity rested and dreaming turns once more toward creation, but this time the creation is deliberate. The age of reflection gives way to the age of remembrance. Somewhere along the fertile river valleys of the Near East, a circle of stones stands against the horizon. Each one was carried from miles away, dragged by ropes, balanced upright by hands, calloused into purpose. They are not houses, not tombs, not fortresses. They are memory solidified. The people who raised them are no longer wandering. They have begun to believe that permanence is possible, that a mark can outlast a lifetime. At night, fires burn inside the circle, and shadows dance upon the stones. They carve figures of beasts and ancestors of sun and storm. And though they cannot yet read or write, they have learned the alphabet of reverence. To remember is a blessing and a burden. When the first storytellers die, their students carve their names or symbols of them into stone. A spiral for one, a handprint for another, a pattern of lines that means voice. They build cairns where the dead rest, not to trap the soul, but to hold its memory. Each stone placed by hand says, "You were here. You mattered." Over generations, these cairns grow taller. The ground itself begins to rise from the weight of remembrance. The stories of the before people change shape again. No longer spirits or ghosts, they become gods, beings vast and immortal, shaped from memory and need. The mountain people who once spoke of Denisovan ancestors now worship a sky-breathing titan who taught them to live in thin air. The jungle tribes remember the shadow-kin beings who slipped between trees, neither man nor beast. Their names shift, their forms transform, but the echo remains. Humanity is learning to mythologize its own origins. Every god is a fossil, every prayer a translation of extinct kinship into eternity. As agriculture blooms, so too does repetition, the rhythm of planting and harvest, death and renewal. Villages expand, populations swell. But the memory of nomadic balance lingers in the architecture of fields and seasons. The first ploughs carve spirals into the soil, imitating the symbols once drawn in ash. Each furrow is a line of continuity, a tether to the cycles that shaped all life. They build grain stores like miniature temples, each filled with seeds, small sleeping versions of immortality. And in tending them, they perform the oldest ritual of all rebirth through care. On the banks of the Nile, the Tigris, the Indus, the Yellow River reflections shimmer. Civilization begins not in conquest but in reflection. Humans watching their own image ripple upon water and deciding to anchor it in stone. They raise walls to catch the river's flood terraces, to guide it canals, to share it. Water becomes law, and law becomes civilization. But in every reflection they see ghosts, the glint of eyes not entirely their own. The memory of other humanities lingers like silt. Even in empire they feel it, the sense that they are not the first builders, only the latest. In the growing cities, a new role emerges: the scribe. He sits beside fires or altars, carving lines onto clay tablets. The symbols, once abstract, now speak names, harvest counts, offerings, dreams. The act of writing is not just record, it is resurrection. To write is to call the dead back into the present. Every mark is a refusal to forget. And yet, as writing blooms, so too does distance. What was once told by memory becomes property of text. The voice of the ancestors grows fainter beneath the weight of ink. Still, the impulse remains holy to make time tangible. As the centuries roll on, cities rise where forests once breathed. Stone replaces soil. Granite replaces bone. The temples climb higher, piercing clouds that once drifted over open plains. Inside, priests whisper the names of gods who were once simply the dead. They anoint the statues with oils, chant to the thunderlight fires in imitation of creation. Civilization, for all its progress, is a memory machine, a vast network built to keep forgetting at bay. Every tower is a tomb for silence, every altar a promise that extinction will not win. The desire for immortality finds shape in architecture. Kings demand to be remembered not as mortals but as eternal flames. Pyramids rise in deserts, ziggurats in floodplains, burial mounds on windy hills. Each is built from the same logic that once led a woman to paint her hand on a cave wall: I was here. The only difference is scale. And beneath all their grandeur lies the same haunting truth: immortality is memory preserved in matter. To live forever is to be continually rediscovered. Even as cities hum with life, some still listen for the older voices. In the mountains of Tibet, the highland tribes keep their rituals simple. They light incense at dawn, let it drift into thin air, whispering gratitude to those who gave them breath, the ancient mountain kin whose blood still pulses in their veins. They do not know the word Denisovan, they call them the breathers. They believe that without their sacrifice, no human could survive at such heights. And though they pray in different languages now, the echo of that reverence is genetic, a gratitude carried in oxygen. As humanity grows restless again, it begins to imagine worlds beyond the earth. The stars that once guided hunters now become destinations for the soul. Heaven is not a place, it is a memory of where we came from, projected into eternity. A sky full of ancestors looking down with judgment and love. The first theologians are poets in disguise. They see continuity in the cosmos, the same rhythm of breath-death and return that shaped the first gardens. And so through religion, the scientific truth of evolution transforms into spiritual narrative. We were not made once, we are made endlessly. But memory has weight. The more humans remember, the more they build, and the heavier the world becomes. The forests thin again, the rivers choke on silt, the skies dim with smoke, the monuments rise higher, but the stars grow harder to see. Civilization begins to forget the simplicity of stillness. The gods multiply, the noise returns. Each empire worships its own reflection and calls it divine. The silence that once healed the earth fades into the din of progress. In the heart of an early city, perhaps Uruk, perhaps somewhere long since turned to sand, a solitary thinker stands before a half-built temple. He watches laborers lift stone after stone under the sun's harsh eye. He asks himself, what are we building toward? His teacher told him it was immortality, but as he looks at the sweating men, the trembling ground, the exhausted animals dragging carts of limestone, he feels something else. Perhaps immortality is not eternal life, but eternal burden. Perhaps the gods we build are the shadows of our own fear of ending. He closes his eyes and hears it, the faint whisper beneath the noise, the sound of wind older than the city carrying a memory of forests and voices long gone. He understands then that no monument can outlive the earth, only the story can. Centuries later the monuments crumble. The rivers shift course, empires fall, but the songs remain woven into lullabies etched in tablets whispered in prayer. Every civilization before it dies passes the echo forward. From mouth to ear, from stone to page, from DNA to dream. The memory of the lost becomes the foundation of what survives. This is legacy, the past turning into scaffolding for the future. And so the pattern continues. Every generation digs into the soil, finds fragments of others and wonders who they were. Each discovery is a reunion. Each excavation a mirror held up to ourselves. When the first archaeologists of the modern world uncover bones in the Denisova cave, they will not realize it, but they are completing a circle. The descendants of the remembered rediscovering the rememberers. And as they hold that fragment of fingerbone beneath fluorescent light, they will feel something ancient awaken a pulse in the wrist of the universe. Not pity, not pride, recognition. What the ancients sought in stone we find in code. What they prayed to in gods we pursue in knowledge. But the desire is the same: to endure, to connect, to mean. The bones of Denisovans in the Altai, the handprints in Sulawesi, the monuments of Egypt, all are facets of one great human obsession, the refusal to vanish. And yet even that refusal is beautiful. For in striving to outlast ourselves, we create art memory and love, the only kinds of immortality the universe understands. The wind still moves through the same valleys where the first fires burned. It hums against the stones of old temples, sighs through reeds beside forgotten graves. If you listen closely beneath the engines and cities, you can still hear it, the breath of those who came before, woven into the background music of the world. They are not gone. They are the quiet between our words, the pause before our songs, the dust that glows in every shaft of light. In a museum thousands of years from now, a child will stand before a glass case. Inside it lies a small brown bone, delicate, ancient, unremarkable. The plaque will read, Denisovan phalanx, 50,000 years old. The child will press their hand against the glass. Their fingers will almost match in size. They will feel a strange warmth, a recognition that crosses the gulf of time. and somewhere deep within their cells the ancient genome will hum softly in reply. The circle will be complete. The wind moves across the world again. It passes over mountains and oceans, cities and bones deserts and data centers. It moves through all things without belonging to any of them, an invisible thread binding beginnings to endings, endings to beginnings. It is the same wind that brushed against the skin of the first Homo sapiens in Africa, that filled the lungs of the Denisovans in their mountain caves, that scattered ash from the first fire into the dawn. It does not change, only the listeners do. And now, as the earth spins beneath the weight of its own memory, the wind whispers the same truth it always has. Nothing is lost. Imagine for a moment that you could step outside of time. The continents drift like clouds. Ice advances and retreats. Rivers carve canyons, then vanish. Species bloom and fade. Humanity appears, disappears, reappears in another form. From above it all looks like breath, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Civilizations rise, collapse and feed the next. Ideas migrate the way birds do, carried on unseen currents. The pulse of creation never ceases, it only changes tempo. And somewhere within that vast rhythm a spark continues, small, fragile, persistent consciousness, aware of itself. We have always been a remembering species. When the first humans painted their hands on stone, they were not merely saying, "I am here." They were saying, "I remember that others were here before me." When scientists sequence the Denisovan genome, they are doing the same thing in another language, reading the oldest autobiography ever written, composed not of ink, but of flesh. Memory, whether carved in rock or encoded in DNA, is our bridge across oblivion. Even now, as technology rewrites the boundaries of what it means to be human, we continue the same instinct that began beside ancient fires, to know ourselves by tracing the echoes of those who made us. If you could listen to the planet itself, you would hear layers of memory humming below the surface. Each fossil, each layer of sediment, each frozen gene is a neural pathway in the Earth's vast brain. Evolution is thought made tangible. Extinction is forgetfulness, rebirth, remembrance. In that sense, we are not apart from the planet's intelligence, we are it. Our species is one of the ways the Earth dreams about itself. Every discovery we make, every story we tell, is the planet becoming self-aware. We are both the question and the answer, both the storyteller and the soil from which the story grows. The sun rises for the 10 billionth time. It lights ruins and temples, jungles and skyscrapers, oceans, and the faint scars of the first human footprints fossilized in stone. Light touches everything that was and is. It sees no difference between then and now, only pattern. Wherever light falls, it completes the circle, shining on the bones of the lost, the eyes of the living, and the seeds of those yet to come. Every dawn is both resurrection and continuation. In laboratories of glass and steel, modern humans grow closer to the power once reserved for gods. They can resurrect species, manipulate genes, summon the extinct from fragments of code. But even in these acts of mastery, the echo persists. Every sequence of DNA they edit carries the imprint of ancient hands, the Denisovan craftsman shaping stone, the Homo erectus forging fire, the Neanderthal carving bone. Our future is written in their grammar. We are not inventing creation anew. We are remembering how to create. To evolve is to recall. Beyond the hum of our machines, the universe remains silent. No alien voices answer our signals, no divine messenger descends. Only the soft cosmic background hum, an afterglow from the first explosion of light. And yet within that silence there is comfort. For the same vibrations that birthed galaxies also shaped our breath, our bones, our consciousness. We are made of the same frequencies that began the universe. To speak, to think, to love is to continue that first vibration. Silence, then, is not absence. It is origin. The modern human stands where the ancient one once did, beneath the same stars before the same questions. Science has replaced superstition, yet the awe remains unchanged. We look at the Milky Way and feel the same vertigo our ancestors felt in the rainforest, the same shiver of recognition that we are both vast and small, mortal and eternal. Progress does not erase wonder, it refines it. We no longer imagine gods in thunder. We find divinity in the structure of atoms, in the architecture of galaxies, in the gentle persistence of life. The language has evolved, but the emotion is identical: awe at the simple fact of existing. Fire has never left us. It flickers now in different forms: electricity, data, the glow of screens. Each is an ember of the first flame that burned in a Denisovan cave or a Homo sapiens hearth. It still gathers us together. We still stare into it, mesmerized, seeking warmth and meaning. It still tells stories in shadow and light. Perhaps that is humanity's truest constant. We are the species that listens to fire. And in that light, every invention from wheel to engine to artificial intelligence is just another flame held against the night. There was never just one kind of human. The idea of singularity is a myth we tell ourselves to simplify history. In truth, we are a chorus, a symphony, composed of Neanderthal harmonies, Denisovan bass notes, and countless forgotten melodies from species whose bones we have yet to find. Every heartbeat carries polyphony. Every thought is a choir of vanished lives singing through us. The soul, if it exists, is not singular, it is communal. When we die, we do not end. We rejoin the chorus. What then does it mean to be human? To know we are temporary, yet to dream of eternity. To destroy and create in equal measure. To seek meaning even when the universe offers none. Perhaps the answer lies not in dominance or divinity, but in awareness, the ability to witness the dance of existence and call it beautiful. We are the eyes through which the cosmos observes itself, the hands through which it builds and buries, the voice through which it sings its own story. Imagine the timeline of all life as a river of light flowing endlessly into the dark. Every species is a ripple, every extinction a bend, every discovery a spark along its surface. We were born from that current, we will one day return to it. But while we exist, we illuminate it. The Denisovans lit it with endurance, Neanderthals with strength, Homo sapiens with thought. Together their lights merge into one long pulse that reaches beyond biology, into art, memory, consciousness. The river flows onward, carrying us toward futures we cannot imagine, but that will remember us nonetheless. Night falls over the planet. From space, the lights of human cities shimmer like constellations on land. They mirror the stars above, forming a perfect symmetry, the cosmos observing its reflection. Somewhere in that luminous grid, a child sleeps, dreaming of a world long gone. He dreams of small people in forests of caves glowing red, with fire of mountains whispering through mist. He does not know their names, but he feels their nearness. The earth dreams through him as it once dreamed through them. All consciousness is continuity. One day tomorrow, or 10 million years hence, the fires will go out again. The wind will sweep through our cities the way it once swept through jungles. Our monuments will crumble, our languages dissolve, our data scatter into silence, and yet nothing will be truly gone. The atoms of our bodies will feed new worlds. The stories we wrote into DNA will continue in forms we cannot imagine. We will not be remembered as conquerors or gods or machines, but as the moment the universe looked at itself and saw meaning. The wind crosses the planet one final time, gathering whispers as it goes. From every grave, every cave, every open field, it collects the breath of the living and the dead. Then, as dawn breaks over the horizon, it releases them, a single exhalation, carrying all that ever was into all that will ever be. If you listen, you can almost hear it. The laughter of children who never met. The songs of hunters who never knew they were kin. The sigh of the earth remembering its own story. A cave on a forgotten island. The walls are marked with fading red hands. Dust floats in a shaft of sunlight, each mote a tiny universe. A child, perhaps ours, perhaps from a future we will never see, places their hand against one of the ancient prints. The fit is perfect. They smile. Outside, the wind rises, carrying the scent of rain, the promise of new beginnings. In that moment, the story completes itself. From dust to breath, from fire to thought, from silence to song, humanity becomes what it always was, the memory of the world, learning to dream aloud.